waihirere a tangi wairea. So, mai tēnei uri, o mahaki, o Ngāti Wāhia, o Ngāti Kohuru, e te kingi, haere, haere, haere atura. Tātou te hunga ora tēnā tātou katoa, e te whānau, mi ngoi tātou. E io o ngā mano, tēnei te whakamuima tutu ki a koe mo tēnei huihui ngā mātou, ara hina mai ki a u ki te tika, ki te puni a mātou, tuku a mai tō wairua tapu hei manaaki, hei awhi, hei tiaki hoki a mātou. Anei mātou e tuohu nēmu I tō aroaro, a ka tuku I tēnei imu, I rungi tingo o tō mātou kaiwhakaore I Ukraiti. Amen. So just to explain, whānau, the mihi that I gave is because I'm from Te Aitanga Mahaki. I'm also well known, I'm from Waihirere and Pārihi Manahi, and there's a strong relationship there between Waihirere and the kingitanga that started from Uncle Kani Te Ua, and then was handed over to my Uncle Bill Kirikiri, Koro Bill Kirikiri, then the parents of the Wehis, Auntie Bub and Nen, and then now that relationship is still kept alive today via Auntie Tangi Wairea and that connection up there. So I want to mihi to our whānau who will probably be on the marae right now, giving their Tairawhiti mihi in that direction. So it's just right, you know, we say me mihi ka tika, it's just right to mihi to this man that's currently being mihi to by our whānau in Tairawhiti right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the beautiful music as well, and the Karakia. Good morning, team, and welcome to our Civil Defence Emergency Management Group meeting. And before I officially move into any business, I do want to take this opportunity to give a massive shout out to Ben, Dallas, the team at Civil Defence. We absolutely creamed it at the awards. There were only 5 awards, and we took out 2 of the Supreme Awards, and both awards for our Civil Defence. One is our operating system that we've built up over years, and I can tell you every single mayor touched base with me and said, can we please come down and bring our Civil Defence team to touch base with Ben and see how it is done. And then the next award was for our marae pods, which Ben already started. I remember our first photo was taken 2 meters apart when we were still in COVID, so that was a process that started way back. So Ben, on behalf of us, the governors and the rest of the Gisborne District whānau, please take back to your team that we admire the work you do. We, with the rest of the country, just want to congratulate. So just ask everyone to put their hands together for our Civil Defence team. Okay, let's crack into business. I do have an apology for Councillor Ria. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Pahura-Huriwai, seconded by Councillor Wharehenga. All in favour? Contrary, carried. I also want to welcome Councillor Parata, who's joining us virtually today. Lovely to see you. Then declarations of interest for today's meeting. Okay, and before we move to our minutes, I am just going to hand over to our CEO to share some sad and happy news with us. The sad news is that Heather's leaving us.
And the happy news is that next to Heather is Julian Martinga, and he is, will be Heather's replacement. Julian is currently with us in the People and Capability team within Council and is transferring across to Democracy Support, so he has a legal background and is really looking to apply that in action. So
awesome.
No, great, Julian.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, confirmation of minutes, non-confidential minutes, page 4. Let's crack into our work.
I move.
Thank you, Councillor Wharehenga. Everyone had just on page 8, my name is misspelled. we can just correct that. My name has been mispronounced so many times that I do not even know how to pronounce it anymore. So if we can just correct that, I'm happy. Mover and Councillor Wharehinga, seconded and Councillor Gregory. All in favour, contrary, carried. I'm going to take you to our page 9 action sheet, action register. So there's still a bit of work in that space. They due in today. I read this agenda. I didn't see the mud stuff in the agenda. Did I miss?
No, it's not there. It's not there.
Oh, okay. So can we then please make sure the dates that is sitting with Murray, your one-pager thingy, on page 9 of the agenda, and which is the other one, Yvette and Ben. Just update those dates of when it will happen.
Yeah, the mud volcano infographic is about to go through to our comms team for making it look nice and pretty rather than scruffy.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to go to our first report on page 11, councillors, and this is a report this is a follow-up report from what we discussed last time, and I'm going to open the floor for Ben to talk to us a little bit. Thank you, Ben.
Kia ora, thank you, Worship. I'll take the report and the supporting attachments read. The concept and equally what's sought here is the formation of the New Zealand response team for Tairawhiti. So the previous workshops went through the process in terms of the validation and what is going to be sought as an embedded capability for the region. What has been presented to you here in terms of the recommendations on page 11 is really the final bit that for me I've got to go through, and it's going to be as much as an opportunity when we go to the South Island is look at the funding models relevant to the way that these teams are set up there. They do exist around the country, but without having the full oversight in terms of or an appropriate structure for Tairawhiti. So that'll be the key next report that I'll be bringing back for the next sitting around what that structure will look like. You'll see, and I'll just make reference within the attachment, if you go to page, from page 15 onwards, where I've just done the outline project business case, and on page 17, the structure reflects really how the group, in terms of governance, is managed. It has GDC as an overarching entity. The Emergency Coordination Centre, in terms of activation, is via the controller. The Emergency Coordination Centre. I'll have a team member that will be a position that I've already held. It's not in addition to headcount. That would be the oversight for the team in terms of training, administration, morale, recruitment, etc. What will be part of it in terms of the determination for certainly the financial contribution and how we're actually going to staff it will be the establishment of a charitable trust, and I'll be confirming that structure along with the funding requirements that I'll be working with finance through GDC and equally some other lessons identified and learned from other regions. For what is presented, just the indicative figures, obviously that's going to be a requirement. This would be something we're going to try and flash mob on the ratepayers. There has to be really a funding process and cycle to articulate that. And I'm reasonably confident we'll get there. It just needs obviously a bit more due diligence than what I've been able to get to at this point. But certainly the other key thing, just in terms of where we had for our last hui, in terms of the setup and the deployment for the team. So I've actually reduced the initial startup to focus on a central team that's going to be based in a central location to achieve accreditation. So I refer to that as phase 1 for a 2-year period, and that'll provide the foundation to get the core components of teams. And within that team, it would be 3 deployable elements that would make up the entirety of the team. And in that regard, it means that we could support deployment into the eastern area, Tairawhiti, equally into the west, covering the Poverty Bay river plain,
and the central team, which the core focus pretty much on the city here. Phase 2, which I allude to really would be the extension of the team to embed permanent standing volunteer groups within each of those 2 eastern and western catchments. But I think that would be a bit ambitious for the first phase until I get the core component of the team established, and equally the funding model to be able to do that as well. So I won't have you take any questions relevant to what's been sought there. What's been asked from me today is really the endorsement, and equally, much as is indicated on page 11, the instructions to come back with the detailed funding and the model that'll be recommended in terms of establishing the team.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Ben. I'm going to open the floor. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. It's just, as I read this, it's not really clear about where the funding's coming from, and as you've just said, you're not really sure either. But I guess some of it is coming from rates. Is that correct?
So Selwyn District has a recently formed team. It's in the last 3 years that they've established. They have a contribution of OPEX from the Sedum budget. Now, we haven't been for an LDP to include this into there, so that's part of the due diligence I've got to really confirm in terms of how we then incorporate that, because at the moment I'd be committing funds that I don't have.
Yes.
And for the ratepayers, that's really not what we're going to commit them to as well.
So, thank you. That was my concern, is that before this gets approved, presumably there'd be some consultation with ratepayers that's in this layer of emergency management is something that they want and to pay for. And also I was wondering if emergency services like police, fire and ambulance have any input into what they think about this.
Yes, so we've done the detailed conversation and workshopping for setting the parameters in terms of what the team's outputs are with emergency services, the Emergency Services Coordination Committee. Now, in that sense, really, it's not about taking away the role of the first responder. What this group actually does, it enhances the fact that first responders remain first responders. So when you get firemen slugging around with sandbags or dealing with removing flood debris, that's not the primary role for police or fire. This is very much an enhancement group, or very much a secondary but key role that will support emergency services to actually do their primary role. And we have brought, much as we did with Gabrielle, NZ8, New Zealand response teams and other assets in the region. There's very much around the number of events we've had. We certainly, it's not if, but it's when our next event will happen. And we've got the ability to redeploy our own assets with local people that really know how to connect into our local communities. And certainly if they're not being deployed in that sense, they'll be supporting the conduit for other outside region teams to be the liaison on the ground with our tangata whenua for how they deploy them.
Thank you.
Councillor Parata and then Councillor Wharehinga.
Morena tātou. I've only got one screen, so and an excited baby in the back, so my apologies. So I had a couple of points that I wanted to raise. The first is point 3 on page 12 in our agendas. Point 3 says there are concerns, currently there are community and iwi groups who are self-resourcing to deploy in response. There are concerns that such groups would not have the training, experience or equipment needed to effectively and safely respond to emergency situations. As such, there are considerable health and safety risks to these groups. And I understand that, but is that not what civil defence is? Is that not what everyone is doing around the country?
Ben?
So I'm going to respond to that. There's two situations that an emergency in terms of response will play out. One is a situational scenario where you're driving past just a car upside down and someone's inside it. And the human instinct will see you respond to that in that scenario. The second scenario to that is where people have a desire to deliberately put themselves in the harm's way to actually go and, their job is to go and get people out of cars that are upside down. Now, the thing I draw there is that to do that without the commensurate training, the accreditation and equally the safeguards to put people in the harm's way is actually contravention of really what the health and safety work and equally what will include up to what Karakia has produced, which is a lot of the case law around the spontaneous deliberate activation of volunteers in that sense there. So yes, it is certainly how things roll. There's a situational requirement where the human nature of people will respond, but to plan to deliberately put yourself in harm's way without the training requirement, the proper PPE or personal protection equipment, and equally everything goes with that, you're deliberately putting yourself into a situation you don't have the accreditation for, the safeguards to protect individuals that are working under that obligation. So this is really designed to help provide volunteers in our community to actually be able to fulfil that function. That it won't get us through every scenario. We accept that really dynamic nature of the response over quite a large diverse region that equally there'll be scenarios that we can't cater for to 100%.
I have a couple of supplementary questions. I hope that's okay. On page 18, I understand the needing to spread it out between phase 1 and phase 2 and begin the phase 1 in town. That makes sense. But phase 2 has the east based in Te Puia Springs, which doesn't make sense to me. And the reason it doesn't make sense to me is that more often than not, the north end of the region gets cut off from Te Puia via Kopuaroa. And that leaves the rest of us who are deeply vulnerable to our own devices. So I'm confused as to why it would be in Te Puia and not elsewhere.
To be really, in terms of trying to deal with, you either got a proliferation of teams throughout the whole district, or picking a point that's central in terms of where deployment can actually cater for a north or south region from there. I guess the only positive about a cyclone or severe weather event, we know that is coming. So the aspect in terms of pre-positioning the right or correct resource and asset into the area, particularly the modelling may perhaps lead to greater impact. That's where the aspect of that team, or could be more than one team, is deployed into the region relevant to where they would best support. Trying to deploy people in the heat of response is generally not how we tend to approach the deployment of a critical or limited resource. Now, up until a catastrophic event, which is really a very short but intense and dynamic scenario, that certainly can't be catered for. For emergency events, I think we can pre-position based on where the greatest need will be met with the resource that we have.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying though is that I think that this needs further discussion and further thought about whether or not Te Puia is based as tagged as a place where people are deployed, mostly because of the nature of its demographic, who's around there and how many people can get there. Like, as far as I'm aware, there's a handful that you could train that would be able to support. Yeah, I suppose I would like that to have more thought in it at the moment because it makes me uncomfortable. There was one more thing. Does this agenda go all the way to page 30? No.
67. This paper goes, no, this paper only goes to 23, 24.
Oh, 24. Okay. Arohamai, it's sort of tricky to see you guys and manage my page. That's all. Those are my main thoughts. Otherwise, I think it's a good idea. Like, I really like the idea of training people to respond better and training communities to respond better. I just really think that more thought has to be put into the supports that exist outside of the city centre, because those people tend to be far more vulnerable. And it would be good to see how iwi sits as a partner, how iwi and hapu can sit as a partner in this space, considering that more often than not, they do deploy resources and provide financial support for response. And I understand that civil defence has its own important hierarchy. I think though that iwi do, in Te Tairawhiti at least, they have a role, and that role has to be partnership. Yeah, thank you.
Just through the chair with that point, so the consultation for that, for Trotac in particular, has been certainly been engaged with really what's intended for Western deployment, and equally Ngāti Pro, the Taiao team, have committed to be the response, core element of response that would form to be deployed in the phase 1 bit. So it certainly has been populated with the CE of Ngāti Pro and the team in terms of what's intended, and that was taken through to the KEG meeting, and for the CE, so Trotac and Tromp really have given their support in that regard. So the intended role and operating mandate is to be very much exactly that, integrated with iwi, partnership given really it's got a remit across the significant stretches that are all here, and obviously the risk profile within both of those catchments for us. So.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Wharehinga, thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the paper, Mr. Green. My questions are centred kind of around page 18 and the charitable trust kind of thing. Is it just using my understanding of structures and trusts and things like that is the rationale for a charitable trust to be able to get funding, external funding and things like that without affecting ratepayer? Is that correct? The other thing that I wanted to ask, and this is leading to a point, but the other thing I wanted to ask was around on page 18, it's under like team vehicles and all of those assets there. Are those for us to give to community in the time that we have an emergency response, or my issue with the paper, and like Councillor Parata, principally I agree, principally I agree with the paper. My big thing is around, I guess, telling the story to the community, or having that conversation with the community around how we do these things. Because when I first looked at these, say the 4x4 vehicles, I was like, I'm sure there'll be 4x4 vehicles in the time of emergency out in the community that I know will just go, yep, that's us, we're on board, here's the keys to this, that kind of thing. I'm sure that there will be private water tank owners in their time of emergency that will go, yes, we will deploy our thing for here for X amount. And I know that there's a cost there, which leads me to think about the rationalisation between us buying something and the carrying costs, and how that compares to just hiring something in those events of emergency. There was those kinds of rationalisation parts of it that was missing from me. So do you have any comment in regards to that, Mr. Green?
Yes, through the chair. So NZRTs, just to give an example of the level of engagement, these are volunteers unpaid. For the regions that do have established teams, the level of commitment for volunteers is they meet weekly. And equally in terms of the resource and what, particularly if you, I'll refer you to the outputs that have been given for these groups, which is on page 16. The foundation skills is obviously the component of really being a responder, emergency IT responder. Flood response, storm response, and the ability to set up welfare centres. So the resourcing, particularly for the likes of vehicles, they come pre-configured on the basis that the role and output, these are vehicles that are fitted with the type of equipment to be able to deploy into areas. They're not spontaneous that we need a four-wheel drive that constitutes the vehicle. The sort of things that, particularly for flood response, we'll be looking at deployable flood barriers up to about 700 metres worth of that. Hence the water tankers actually form a point, if you recall from the Zone 3 conference, there was the demonstration of the setup of the inflatable water-filled barriers. That's the type of capability that this team would be looking to deploy in terms of being able to sort of be the first response for flooding. So the vehicle may seem, in terms of, as I say, we could go get vehicles requisitioned if need be. fact that we train people and the training regime is actually quite high, what it takes to get to accreditation. It's actually having the complete package. The other thing with the group, it's not only just regionally deployed, but once they're accredited, and they've got to meet quite a stringent standard for accreditation, they become part of a national deployable pool that'll support an outer-region response into a neighbouring area for deployment as well.
And also in regards to like the water tankers, for example, that makes complete sense in regards to the 4x4s, and that lines up to what I was saying about the full story, to be able to paint that full picture for the community. Because if I'm looking at that and I see 4x4 vehicle, which includes storage capabilities and radios, I have a 4x4 vehicle which has the storage capabilities and a radio. I could just be like, hey, here's the keys to that. But if you're saying that these will be equipped with the flood barriers, people that will be driving them will be trained to deploy those things, that's definitely something that our community, that I personally am happy to hear, but our community would also want to know in regards to spending money on something. You know?
Yes, and so equally recruitment for this will be a key part of really defining the why, and the capability and role and function of it. So that's very much a communications campaign to really highlight what is the capability. We're asking you whether you want to have this embedded here, or do we just rely on what comes in from outer region?
Thank you.
The other bit I'd add to the vehicles is that they're trained to drive them, they become used to driving them, and they have their confidence in driving those, and it's a health and safety issue. Yes, they can drive the other vehicles, but they are trained to actually drive these vehicles and comfortable in them, and in pressure circumstances, that can be the difference as well.
Thank you.
Are you waving at me or do you want to speak? Waving and speak. Councillor Telfer and then Councillor Pahuru.
Yeah, look, the concept to me is good, but I just do question the costs associated with it, the need for a home base. Like how often are these likely to be deployed? And the vehicles, it states here that there's no extra full-time people being taken on, so are these just for volunteers to use? So how long are they going to be sitting here and not being used? I just question whether or not, whether or not a container at one of our sites, or whether or not this can be opened up to use for meetings or whatever. Whether we haven't already got enough facilities that can be utilised around the district for meetings or trainings or whatever else. So just the concept, I think, is good. I would like a little bit more. This has just come at us, so I'm just wary of the ongoing costs for something that potentially and hopefully only gets used once every 3 years or something. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, I can sit here after 4 years, it's probably some of the busiest 4 years of my life, that this group would be justified by actually having a capability in the region here. And it's not a group that just turns up to have a talk every week. The training regime, and I think that's really part of following on Councillor Whatahinga, is really demonstrating what does it do and why does it do it, how does it do it. It is more than just a group of volunteers sitting around a table doing training. The training is very much in terms of the competency, the time to get it, all the type of why the outputs for the group actually do matter. Flood response, very specific set of KPIs and really outputs for that. The storm response up to including, you're clearing trees off roads, helping to assist with access or doing cordons for the containment of spontaneous volunteers. Quite a wide and varied role of functions, and actually for a group of volunteers, like a lot of volunteers, we ask a lot of them. And that's certainly the unanimous feedback from the other groups I've dealt with on this, is the engagement level is, for people who meet weekly and commit to actually turning up to these, is far more than just an ad hoc sort of level of engagement. It is certainly, I think, look, there's a few questions relevant around OPEX, is the level of resourcing kit. I think to have a capability to be accredited and actually have the outputs to be able to operate that, you've got to have the full Monty for it. So hence the charitable trust really is designed on the basis this is a volunteer organisation, is a common vehicle used for funding, that actually attracts that to provide to the CapEx and the contribution into that, make up that team. And that's why really progressing it beyond really where it is. Certainly we've had this in our previous meeting, but the detailed aspect of financials, I can't really commit the council to because I don't have that authority to do so, but I need to be able to come back with the detailed case for that. And really that'll be what the decision point will be for the next one.
Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
Thanks for the report, Ben, and again, congratulations to your team on those amazing awards. Was there any money attached to those? Or
Let me
kudos?
know, I'll be find anything on the wall.
Oh, no, hopefully that they'll put a bit of weight behind the applications that you eventually put into funders. I share Councillor Parata's concerns about Te Puia being the base east or in the east for the reasons that she's given. To me, Ruatoria would be a more appropriate base because it is more central to those of us right up the north. And typically when we get cut off, that's as she said, Kōkoro is where it happens. So I have concerns for those of us north of Te Puia. And again with the training, I guess it's just around comms and who and how and what, because I guess in our communities there's a lot of transient farming coming and going as well, so sometimes the volunteers change from time to time. So making sure that those who are new in our communities can have opportunity to participate in sedum trainings. That's from Pōtaka all the way down. I guess I just wanted to know, my question is around the charitable trust and what the makeup of that would be, who the representative, what kind of makeup you're anticipating for the trust, and the rest was covered by Councillor Wharehinga and Councillor Parata. Thank you.
Mr. Green.
I think the trust composition, everything else, that's deserved. We're bringing that into the next, having a pretty detailed breakdown of that contribution. I probably was a bit remiss. I could have had Liz Smith, who's looks after the NZRT Secretariat, given that that is the accrediting authority for amendment with this. And Liz is certainly very involved in the setup of the previous groups there. Much as Ian in his role across other regions also has had some oversight there. But I mean, they're good questions. Te Puia, look, if it's not locked in stone, it's only put there really in terms of taking a midpoint on the coast. If we need to configure, much like we do, the flexibility is inherent to the way we actually roll sport. And the purpose in terms of what it's committed to, it'll meet the way that we need to have it responding to as well.
Questions answered? This is your last chance. This is for a business case to come, a financial business case to come to us. If I take you to page 11, so provide feedback on our business case, which was attachment 1, and then endorse in principle establishment, which we in principle did last time as well. This is not the first time we're discussing this. And then there will be some fine tuning. You've received some feedback on locations, which we want you to take into account. And then more detail on the financing and funding. Kapai, do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Pahuruhuriwai. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. Okay, Ben, now it is your big report. We'll first talk some TMO updates, then some operational updates, and then we'll also ask Ian to chat to us. So the floor is yours and we'll work through in chunks. You just tell us when you are open for questions, or councillors, when you feel like questions, put up your hands because we're covering the whole bit to page. Yeah, well, when does this stop? Anyway, the floor is open.
Yes, obviously quite a chunky report this round, and it's probably a good thing in terms of you can see the breadth in terms of contribution and what is underway. In terms of report, obviously taking it as read, certainly in terms of the national recognition for 2 projects, as you see on page 26, being recognised at Tairawhiti Local Government Excellence Awards for our common operating picture intelligence dashboard. It certainly may be a gap within the national system and across a number of regions. It's a tool that we've had and we've used the last 3 years, so it's certainly getting attention on the basis that the North Island Severe Weather Report has been a key document now that's been led in terms of transformation for emergency management across a number of different areas and sectors as well. Having just come back, obviously, with the worship and the councillors and for our recent trip to Wellington to the LGNZ, we're pleased to be really getting our regional recognition for a lot of good mahi that goes on across Tairawhiti and equally what's been underway for the last 3 or 4 years. Just in terms of, obviously, I've made a mention of my visit with the Joint Centre for Disaster Research over to Washington State. Really interesting in terms of the hazard scape, very much reflective of our own exposure here in Tairawhiti. Equally, spending time with the First Nation tribes, so it's very much off-grid into their version of Te Tairawhiti and really getting an insight in terms of really it's a very similar kaupapa around the actual aspects of readiness, come the planning and resource planning for that as well. One of the key things though, as I always point out, is that no one over there does it by themselves. It's very much a highly integrated and a requirement to leverage all layers within the system. It's federal, state, down to the local response, which in the comparative sense here is our hapu whānau activation very much within the remote areas there. And a lot of good work. I've already shared a lot of subject matter content and a more of enduring relationship with some of the areas we've been into as well. So that's been really awesome. Just from page 28, what you see there, it gives you a high-level overview of the resource in the region for emergencies. And phase 1 for that, which was really running from the 5th of March 2021. That day is significant. It was when we had the 3 tsunami and earthquakes in the one day. Up until the delivery of that phase 1 project took place up until December last year. And if we go back to where we were then, it was really around actually asking communities to not just be aware of the catastrophic or significant hazard, but really had to ask the question, so what and then what? So what and then what generally relates to the fact if you're asking people to be prepared for a catastrophic or natural disaster event, really is what can we do more than just inform them about the hazard. So the so what led to really in terms of really engaging people in terms of the why, understanding the science and equally what Mātauranga brings through with that as well. The then what really led to critical risk-based planning with a view to resource our communities for deliberate enablement of response and actually leading their own resilience. So you can see on page 30 a number of sites that have actively and they're very much still underway at present. So phase 1 refers to where we had the initial delivery of the first tranche of the project up until the end of last year. What's underway now is this phase 2 is the better funding, now identifying particularly our rural areas and one of the most critical areas that's often overlooked and assumed to be always been okay as a city. And 73% of your population lives here. Anything major that's going to happen here is going to have a significant effect in terms of how you're going to try and resource a large, very dense population base to be able to respond the same way our rural whānau do the same thing. Any questions relevant to those projects? I appreciate Councillor Huriwara was one of the very first hui we had going back to the start of that project. So then I haven't seen council here for so long. I said I overpromise and underdeliver, and we'll go north from there, and that's exactly where we got to, I think. So.
The keys were delivered yesterday, or last week.
Right. I just also want to welcome Councillor Cranston, who has joined us online. Welcome, Councillor Cranston. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I don't have a question in regards to that first chunk of the report. The thing that I want to say is congratulations. The entire chunk is about, you know, the awards that we got, but also your attendance over in Washington was off the back of a positive relationship with Te Runa Manui o Ngāti Porou. They're making space, you know, like that's a positive sign there. And also your appointment as alternate controller, national alternate controller. You know, there are a lot of things to congratulate in this part. So just want to summarise it by me to yourself and me to our second team in regards to that change.
Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, just a probably a question. I suppose it is a question. Page 37 and 30 and then 38. Just on the NIWA flood frequency analysis, which is involving a lot of staff time as well. And
Is this the next?
What page are you on?
In the principal scientist report part of it.
Just tell us what page on that.
37.
37.
That's the principal scientist.
Yeah, I just there, page 44 at the bottom, it just says there about, you know, comparing and trying to predict when these things happen. I just do query the amount of time of staff time, and we're always aware of staff time and how much is being spent on different things and the capacity. I just sort of query trying to predict something like Cyclone Gabriel, whether it's going to come next year or the year after. It's more, isn't it more about, you know, you watch the present weather forecasts and whatnot, and you're going to get an idea from that. So I just do question, you know, a lot of the stuff's nice to know, but is it actually needed and do a lot for us going forward? That's all.
I would, through your worship, if I may, say this is a fundamental business of civil defence emergency management. It's part of our responsibilities under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. We're required to address the 4 R's of emergency management, of which understanding and modelling how the flood frequencies, how it hits, to ensure that our communities are better prepared and that we're able to respond and build our communities in the appropriate places is very fundamental to what we do, on balance with what we do in a response area.
Any more questions? Otherwise we carry on with your report. Thank you, Ben. What page are we on?
31, we'll just talk to space weather. This is the number one hazard.
Oh, Councillor Parata had a question.
Sorry?
There we go.
Sorry, I thought my hand was already up. Where am I? I just wanted to get an understanding of point 10 on page 28, which is the community resilience plans. Where are those? And who has them? The community resilience plans.
So the collective engagement with which the recovery team has led, we've pulled through really what that consultation process has brought. To be honest, what's probably been highlighted or asked for from communities is probably a lot less than actually what they're going to get. Many have actually been probably quite humble in terms of what they're seeking. It tends to be focused on training, very much engagement space. I guess I've taken it beyond more than that to be able to give them actually capability. And that capability is really where we can embed that, and it actually forms a key component for us, particularly for my team, is the resource may be divested very much into the hapu or community group. The critical bit that I want for the team is the ongoing aspect of maintaining competency, training and engagement on an annual basis to be able to keep them connected, relevant to how to use it, and equally empower them with the user knowledge for it as well.
So just to be clear, the community resilience plans and the community recovery plans are not the same thing.
So through your worship, I was just going to clarify that, Councillor Parata, they are the community recovery plans, and so what's been pulled out are the resilient, all the components that are relevant in terms of civil defence emergency management support.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that clarification. And I'm relieved to hear that, because that means that we're actioning the aspirations of the community. I also probably wanted to note, and this probably goes back to the previous paper, is that it's likely that communities ask for less than they are going to get now, because they don't know. They don't know what they need, and the more you learn and the more skills and capability you have, the more you're aware of what it is that you actually require in order to be resilient and in order to respond. So that's one thing. I've got other questions. In this, page 30 is a list of what would you call it? Marae, phase 1, Marae Emergency and Preparedness Project, completed December 2023. And then phase 2 is Better Off Community Project, active projects to be completed by December 2024. That list, excellent list, huge list. Can I get an explanation of why Ruatoria is not on this list?
They already have resourcing from, they actually come under phase 1, just in terms of where the initial funding. Probably not shown on there, but they have, just in terms of the initial placement for equipment. What we've been working with, particularly for the periphery around, also around Ruatoria, is with the challenge with particularly the coastal areas, the Reparoa, Tikapa and the like, was really looking to bolster and supply that, with the Ruatoria being the central focus for it. So some of the other things, particularly for Rua, is looking at airfield resilience, and that's probably recognising its role as a hub for Tairawhiti, particularly on the basis that we know that generally access will see our areas north of, we've spoken to Kokoroa, being cut off up there. So how we develop that resilience is going to be quite central on Ruatoria.
I think I understand that that Ruatoria has been difficult. I'm going to say difficult, probably complex to deal with since Cyclone Gabrielle and hail, and I understand that the team has worked really hard in building those relationships. But the importance of Ruatoria, as what Ani said earlier, is that it ends up being the central point for the East Coast for us to be able to support other communities. It's great that Tikapa and Reporua are getting the support, but they're not going to get the support if it doesn't come out of Ruatoria. Like, ultimately, Ruatoria is responsible for all of the valleys, so that includes Makarika, it includes Whareponga, Tapu Wairoa, Tūparoa, all of those, kinds of smaller valleys. The Poroporo, it is serviced by the main hub, which is in the middle, in the heart of Ruatoria. So I just take your point that you've been engaging, but I would really like to see them come back up on this list, and because the importance of what Ruatoria contributes to the northern end of the East Coast is hugely important going forward for resilience and recovery and response. Thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you. Councillor Pahurihuriwai.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Parata's been talking about the space weather kind of, because does that mean, like, we've just gone through the whole process of Starlinks and all of that carry on to make sure that we have comms when everything else fails? Does that mean that space weather is going to, basically, that will cut off as well?
So space weather, and particularly including it into this report, is much as NEM is is now appointed as the lead agency for it. So we had a space weather event, for a call, it was about 2 months ago. During that event, 44 Starlink satellites were actually physically impacted by that. So what it underscores, particularly, and we're going to have to certainly lead a communications campaign about what is space weather. It sounds unfathomable in terms of what we deal with on the ground here. It's actually very significant in terms of what will play out in terms of what Solar Maximus for next year. It's an 11-year cycle that plays through, and equally it's the event referred to as the Carrington event, which in 1865 the astronomer noticed that one of the biggest solar flares. Now, what followed within 5 to 6 days from that was one of the biggest electromagnetic storms. This is 1865, had a significant impact. For New Zealand, it's certainly awareness with the critical lifelines and power infrastructure. The challenge really, or one of the key significant things with the electrical grid, is that would need to be closed down within 18 minutes of a significant solar event being applied. What it then takes to restore that grid is up to 2 weeks in terms of restoring power for that. So very much, it's certainly in the genesis, I guess, of people understanding the impact, relevant to try and comprehend the impact of it. Our world is completely wired in terms of communications, GPS, and it's not just a localised event for New Zealand, it's actually a global, key global risk there. So we are very much working with, in terms of the NEMA communications, but very much looking to promote in terms of what resilience would look like in terms of that as well.
Thank you. I guess, I mean, yeah, the comms is the critical thing, and everything else fails. So going back to number 8 wire mentality, but I think, and also, no, I've lost my train of thought, but yeah, the comms that we get prior to a weather event are really appreciated and important. And I think, like, we have a few, what I would think are weather events, but one or two that we haven't had a warning for, they've just sort of happened upon us. The next minute there's like rain for Africa and thunder and lightning, and people are not sure what's going on. But the pre-warning that we get is really important. Then we let our communities know, okay, looks like we're going to have a weather event, go and get stocked up, just in case. And because we can do that, people are less anxious, they can get prepared and know that they're going to have to hunker down maybe for a couple of days. So I just commend you guys for when the comms do come out, and just to keep that going. And the forecasting of what's ahead of us as well is great to see. So just appreciation for that too.
Okay. Next part of the report.
If I can we just talked to the Sealand Group Plan, and Vet is the project lead for this. Are you happy to give your...
Sure. I'd really like to get some feedback actually. So it's attached as, oh my god, 133. Yeah. So, and it's just intended to be a really short little snippet of the approach, so that you can see kind of where it's heading and provide some feedback. So we're going down the garden road. Yeah. So I have. If I start off with, there's a whole bunch of things that have to be in a group plan, but there's still quite a room to move and some room to be quite a little bit bespoke. The group plan at the moment, one of the biggest issues that I see with it is it's trying to be all things to all people. So it's got a whole bunch of, it's got a strategic layer of stuff, and then it's got a whole bunch of really detailed operational things about who's in charge of this aspect of communications, etc., etc. And all of that stuff is important, and I'm not saying that it's not. However, what I'm suggesting is a more sophisticated approach to layering of documents, so that the documents are targeted to the audience that they're intended for. So this group here, for instance, the group plan is your baby. You're in charge of strategic direction and setting stuff up. So the group plan needs to be your bailiwick. There are a whole bunch of things that could sit underneath that, though, that are really targeted at Ben's team and the operational delivery of things, which, yes, you guys need to be across, but not to this level of detail that is sometimes in the group plan places. Because what happens is people might go to the group plan and try and find something in it, it's quite unnavigable. It's really hard to find what you need. Because the different audiences are not catered for. So the proposed document hierarchy on page 137 kind of shows a structure, sorry, it's quite detailed, where the audience is the critical thing on the right-hand side. So, for instance, the Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Plan is really for the seating group here, the GDC councillors, and I separate those positions out because they all have different functions and roles within seating that the group plan will talk about. EB chairs and boards are in there as well, and then we have the layer, I suppose you'd say, the executive leadership of organisations as well as the seating specific positions. Now, those audiences are across the planning for civil defence. That means understanding what the vulnerabilities are, so what hazards and risks are there, and where do our vulnerabilities lie in terms of people, infrastructure, and the like. It involves setting a set of objectives so that we know actually what we want to achieve out of emergency management. So this is where the regions may differ. For instance, we may say that actually our objectives are that, what's a good objective to have, is that welfare, the welfare of people, is the most important thing to us. You know, we may say that as one of our objectives. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but yeah. Underneath that, then you start to see the strategic approach, which is the way that we arrange ourselves in this region, and how we will work the key processes and the key decisions, and how they will make things like the delegations that will be given to the controller under the managing emergency situations. It will talk about the great using what I want to refer you to page 135, the emergency management framework diagram that I've put here, because it will talk about using the 4 R's, and talking about how the parts that are in peacetime and the parts that are in wartime, for want of a better expression, because the roles and the responsibilities change depending whereabouts you are in that system and in that phase. What I'm suggesting is that we're always in a phase of emergency management. We are not ever out of it. If we're not in a response, we're in a recovery, and we're planning, we're land use planning to reduce risks, and we are preparing for the next thing. And all of this stuff overlaps. And the reason this diagram also is helpful potentially to be fleshed out is that at each stage we can tack onto this. Each stage will have its own plan, which will list all of the roles and responsibilities during that phase. So, which is, we come to emergency management phase plans. And those are the 4 R's plus the 2 core components really, that are cut across all of the R's, but that are really important from previous experience with events, and that's welfare and communications. So so there would be emergency management phase plans that would really be targeted at the KEG would kind of drive those. This is the proposal at the moment. The KEG, as the operational leaders within the district, would actually drive the development of those plans.
Just clarify for everyone, the KEG is like the CEO of council, she's the leader, then it's police, ambulance, iwi CEOs, health, everyone, all the CEOs of all the organisations that pull civil defence off on the ground. That's the KEG. Central
Coordinating
executive group.
Yeah, so the KEG would own the development of those plans. It's a really good space for them to sit in because it's actually about implementing your strategic direction in a really tangible way by saying, okay, here's our plan. And in the group plan, we will have a template for what those EM PPs need to include. So, yeah. They will have a degree of operational, they will say things like, for instance, with Dallas's welfare plan, they will talk about how welfare is going to be split up into sub-functions and who's going to lead the different sub-functions. So they will talk about the specific roles and responsibilities for operational delivery under each of these things. Under the response plan, there will be a whole bit about New Zealand response teams and where they sit within this and what their roles and responsibilities will be, for instance. Okay, then underneath all of this sits some standard operating procedures that are really targeted at those people out in the field who are doing emergency management every day and are needing to understand the best practice or the way that we do things in Tairawhiti. And these are through, for want of a better word, SOPs, standard operating procedures. And they are really about technical things. They are about technical matters that often they're a standardised set of instructions, essentially. And I say this for instance, this is the level of detail that I'm talking about, is how to do an EPO, electronic purchase order, for something that you need for an emergency response. What to put in, what to fill in, who's the process, who signs it off, and how to do it. Do you know what I mean? So how to get approval for claims reimbursement during response. But also it would include, during the readiness phase, it would include business continuity planning. What do we want to see in business continuity plans? What should they contain and the like. And infrastructure levels of service. So there would be this was a good thing, I think, that was included in the proposed bill that got smashed, which was setting up expectations around what you can expect following an event. It's just it's a detailed part of business continuity planning. And then some sort of how to set up a desalinization plant, a mobile desalinization. Is that how you say it? Desalinization plant. Yeah. And then underneath all of this is a range of public information. So we cannot expect the community to read our group plan, to read our EMPPs, and to read our SOPs and understand and know what they are about. They are for the people who are working in the CDM. There's a whole bunch of information that needs to be packaged, that needs to be prepared, that covers how this framework works for the public. So they understand it and they understand who's who in the zoo and what they can expect at each of the phases of emergency management. So that's the proposal at the moment. Yeah.
When are we going to sign this off for this?
So you'll probably get when's the next group meeting? December?
At the end of the year, yeah.
November 13.
So you'll probably get a draft that will go out to consultation for
The next year.
yeah,
February.
Yeah. So I think I did want to talk about some of the key proposed changes. I've talked about a couple of them. Another one of them is around the reason for this proposed document hierarchy is that we're looking at, one of the things we've sort of noticed is that Ben's team is so far ahead of what's in the group plan. So there is, we're learning so much from all the events, and that's going to carry on. Climate change is here to stay, so we're going to continue to learn and continue to get better. What this framework is trying to do is say, okay, these EMPPs, these operational detail things, they need to be agile, they need to be able to change like that. And we have a set of a process, okay, we need to communicate it out to the community link and then put it out to the public, and that's the process. Rather than having to put it into a review of a group plan, which has to go through a process of they're meant to be agile, they're meant to be flexible.
Councillor Wharehinga.
There is also a set of a really strong drive in the group, suggested in the group plan around implementation planning, so that so that this framework can actually be done and carried out. and that would include working with NEMA and other potential partners and funders around what it might, how we would, who's going to do what and fund what, essentially.
Are you happy to take a question from Councillor Wharehinga?
I'm comfortable with the hierarchy of the documents and things like that. You know, I'm not plans man, so I don't know the things. That's why I have to rely on ops in regards to their recommendation around how to do that. You know, how we do our overall group plan. I did want to ask at the bottom of page 138, and it aligns to what Your Worship the Mayor was asking. It was in regards to timelines. I see that the drafting has been done in October 2024. We have meeting in November 14. It would be great to get that draft at that meeting prior to going out for consultation.
Yeah, so this needs to change to November. Well, my deadline is still October because I have to get stuff to you a month before.
Yeah.
So it's still November 2024.
So it's just supplementary to that. It's also not tagged in our governance work plan as being reportable here, so if we could update the governance work plan as well. So to just have a look at that, just so that we're able to stay on top of it prior to going out. That was all, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, any more stuff we need to know? Yes, no, I will get to Councillor Parata. Anything else you want to add in regards to our plan, or are you happy for us to carry on with questions?
I did want to say one thing, and that is that this is just catching up with what's already really happening on the ground. Yeah. It's telling the story.
Isn't it great though to be in that
people
position?
Can understand, you know, what's happening. That's why the public part of it's really important. It's just making this system more navigable, more elegant, and more usable.
Awesome. Councillor Parata.
Yeah, well, I've been lucky enough to be part of some of the conversations around the group planning and the sub-functions, and I just am really impressed with the way the TMO team in particular has been leading out on this resilience planning, I suppose is the best way to describe it, and preparedness. But also just the idea of being really aware of what belongs to us, what level of detail do we need to know as governors, and as planners and as implementers, and what level of detail does our community need to know to feel safe, to feel like we're onto it, that they're going to be looked after, that they can rely on us. I have no feedback for the report at this stage. I just am impressed by it, really, and impressed at how far ahead of the rest of the country that we are in terms of emergency management, and considering the lessons that we've learned along the way, and there have been lessons, and I can see that they're being more and more implemented every time we come to this table. I can see more inclusion, more consideration in regards to the documents that we're reading going forward. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that I've noticed that has been a long journey, but every time we come to the table, it's getting better and better. So I'm happy to move it. That's it.
Yeah, Councillor Parata. Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, just one question for Ben, probably. Just going back to lessons learned from Cyclone Gabriel and the whole response and the way it was conducted, and bringing people in from outside the area to actually run it. There was a lot of frustrations from different communities and almost, saying they were left to die and whatnot else. From that, are you reasonably confident that we're heading in a direction where maybe that side can be a bit more directed from here? Or is that a national?
In terms of resource prepositioning,
More the coordination of the area, like people that don't know where things are and what's out there, and that calls and helicopter flights that were held up for way too long for what they should have been. So I'm just wondering whether
Yeah, look, it was, at the end of the day, it's a nationally declared event as well. It's the third time in our history we've done that. The complexity and the size of the event, when you've got 6 regions, with every community and every population member in strife, to some degree strife, it's going to be complex. But look, I'd take heart in terms of where we were in February. We were functioning. We weren't a headline in terms of what the severe weather events or the reports that come out. Did we get it right? Certainly didn't. Were we failing? I don't think, in terms of where we were, in terms of the size and complexity of the event, this region, we certainly had a very good foundation of what had been built on the previous ones. Aspects that certainly, you know, even from the national system improvements around national command and control, deployment of national assets, integration into regional plans, I mean, they're our day job component around enhancing that fully. So, you know, having unscripted swarms of helicopters come into your region, that certainly won't be the expectation for next time. There's a reason we have a command and control, a regional centre that's probably one of the best, I would say, that really is an exemplar in terms of what that centre would perform and do. And I think we can take heart that we are significantly leaps and bounds ahead from where we were in February last year. So that's tantamount to services as well. It's not just really emergency management and the core component. It is really all of us that make up the whole system, and that extends down to community as well. We've spent a lot of time with the way, and I think it's certainly key to highlight that we are unique as a region. We are a single unitary authority for a region. We don't activate territorial other authorities such as Hawke's Bay. We are required and certainly rely on activating our communities directly, and that is what the 7 groups of the other 16 groups don't. So that relationship is actually why we spend so much of our focus on readiness and really getting that connection.
Can I add to that through your worship, and we recognise there's always room for improvement. We can take comfort in the fact that there were about 3 independent civil defence emergency management response reviews that occurred over since Gabrielle. We know that in at least one of those has recognised the Tairawhiti Emergency Management Officers in Vietnam, along with the way that we manage our coordinating executive group and the involvement of all the partners from across the region. We were also a testament to the common operating platform that we utilised in civil defence, which is now New Zealand recognised in terms of being a good standard. So, yep, there are things that we can improve on, but there's certainly things that we should hold our heads up proud to say that we did good by our community in most of the areas where we tried to, across all our emergency responding partners as well, not just in our emergency management office.
Mr. Ian.
Thank you, Your Worship. In respect to the group plan, in NEMA's perspective, that it's got to comply with section 49.2 of the Act and the National Disaster Resilience Strategy and the 4 POs that sit under that. And if your plan does that, it will actually pass the muster. When we get the plan, we will do a full technical review of it under each section to make sure that obviously our subject matter experts look at it, look at the warfare, look at the response, look at the recovery, look at the integration with your hazards and risks and how they are. How do they actually fully outline to the public and your communities what they're going to do, how they can respond so they actually understand what the issues are and where they sit. Based on the 4 plans we've done so far, we've given back, I think, about 40 pages of recommendations on the group plans that have come to us so far. Can I say also, in respect to your timeline, going out in December, public consultation has to be for 1 month at least, 3 months. And December's not a good month to really do public consultation. Then you've got to have, or have the ability to hear those submissions. So getting it done by then and implementing it by December 24 is going to be a really quite a time frame, which I don't think you can achieve.
So can we take a look and discuss what December really would look like for us if we're realistic? Maybe just push stuff out a couple of months.
Yeah, I don't think is that an issue? This is not set to this is estimate, obviously, completion, the EST means estimated. So it's like, these would be able to get it done by then, but this isn't set in stone. So
And so also in the plan, if you do reference any other plans that you've got, because I don't think SOP should go into the plan, those plans need to be available to the public to look at and current as well. So that may increase this work on this plan as well.
Thank you for that feedback.
Sorry about that.
Any more questions or queries of the lovely Yvette or the lovely Ben? I had to say lovely Ben, because imagine if I said the lovely Yvette and Ben. That would have gone down. Okay, so let's move on and then we'll close. So are we happy to go to the NEMA? Are we?
Principal scientist, please.
Okay. Dr. Murray. Thank you, Yvette. 32. Thank you. Oh, I forgot that we do drink coffee in this place. Hey, let's have a coffee and come back 10:30. What has happened to me?
You changed woman.
You did it. Why did no one text? Changed woman, hey? I'm doing a health. Good choice.
Good choice, the last thing.
Alrighty, Marina, good morning everybody. You can see that my report starts out by talking about two very large landslides occurring after dawn this year. I really love it when we have these stats that keep on giving. And we've actually now got two more. One of which is at Wahau Beach Road. It's a reactivation of one that failed during Gabriel, and it's quite a bit bigger, and that's actually now being assessed. But the other one is in actual fact in the TRI, and hopefully not, but we're going to have to assess it. The run out for that would include the pipeline, the water pipeline. So there'll be quite a bit of work we need to do on that. So I'll update on that later on once we actually get that work done. I presume if you had a look at the, I wouldn't call them photographs, but the 3D models of these landslides, the key thing about it, if you look at the Bushy Knoll one, which is on page 33, once you know what you're looking at here, you can see that most of the debris is still resident in the valley there, but is pretty much primed to go. And you can also see there that pale green is actually a landslide dam. So the real concern with this is if we have a heavy rain event, which won't happen in September but may later, and that fills up and pressurises that debris, it may generate a significant debris flow that could migrate some distance downstream, and we do have a bridge downstream of that. And so again, that's being monitored quite closely. The second one is at a place that's pretty dear to everybody's heart, which is Young Nick's Head at Te Kura Park. And we had a very large rock fall there. Happened 3 weeks ago now. And the scale of it is similar to the scale of the Kidnappers landslide that occurred in 2019, which obviously closed the access along the base of that beach. There are indications with that landslide and rockfall that there's a significant amount of more material that could go. And so, depending on the weather, it may end up being this weekend and access to Young Nick Station. The aim is that we'll probably look to flying a drone along the entire escarpment at Young Nick Station, looking for other areas of risk, and we're fairly closely engaged with Ngā Tamanui and as after we do that drone footage, that we'll actually do a video presentation for the broader iwi, because not everybody can turn up at the marae, so that they are very informed. The one, I haven't even started doing work on the one up in the Tairawhiti Valley yet, but this is an area where we have had concerns in the past. We're going to initially do a process called LiDAR differencing. This is where we compare the LiDAR we flew after Cyclone Gabriel with that we flew in 2019, and that can tell us areas which are actively moving. Hopefully that will give us some hotspots that we can then go and evaluate further, and if need be we can elevate that to or request an elevation for that through to GNet to get assistance to look at it. We did have smaller scale landslides after the June 24 storm, one of which resulted in the dwelling being red-stickered in the Matoki Valley, and hopefully we can get through a process to get that one transitioned through to a yellow sticker, which is an advisory to recommend that they can stay there, but they can relocate is preferable during heavy weather, and but obviously is dependent on what happens with the insurance company and the Natural Hazards Commission. That event had no relationship through to Cyclone Gabriel, so it was not a subsequent event that had a precursor then, and so just one of these things. Life still goes on and landslides still occur, and something we're going to have to keep on facing in this region. Moving on, we had a storm surge event associated with the June storm event. It was one of probably the more significant storm surges we've had here in my tenure in Gisborne, Tairawhiti, and we're finding significant erosional impacts of that everywhere from Gisborne City north to beyond Inara Bay. In some places we had quite severe erosion, and I referenced there Tollig Bay close to the motor camp, and we're doing design work at the moment for utilising the remaining woody debris that is at that site to come up with a using cool matting, the coconut fibre matting, to actually encapsulate the woody debris, push against the toe of the dune, do sand push-ups, and then replant with the Uawanui team to actually stabilise the toe of those dunes and see how that works. I've tried that technique overseas, but not with woody debris, so we're trying to make a positive out of something that's a negative, and utilise that material in a way that actually helps buttress the toe of those slopes, because those dune forms, if anybody's been at the south end of Tollig Bay, the erosion that is occurring there close to the motor camp is getting quite significant, and so this is a methodology for using the woody debris that we do know is there with a positive impact potentially on that site, and if it works, then there are a couple of other places where we could use that soft engineering to also facilitate protection, one of which is the Whangarā Urupa, which suffered severe erosion on its face during that event, and the other one was remobilisation of the revetment wall put in at Inara Bay Urupa after the March 22 storm, where that has partially collapsed, and but there is there from utilising that material and to hopefully provide a protection to those really critical cultural assets. Moving on, all the regional councils participate in what we call special interest groups, and one of those is the Regional Hazard Risk Management one, of which I'm a member, and we have decided that we'll actually hold a meeting of that group here in Gisborne Tairawhiti over in the Rose Room in November this year, and it's an opportunity for hazard analysts from all the regional councils and CDM officers who participate in that forum to come here and discuss particularly the Cyclone Gabriel and our year of storms, but also to go out and have a look at what we faced during that event. Right, moving on. One of the things we found after Cyclone Gabriel is that our flood warning manual was probably not 100% fit for purpose. Flood warning officers or flood warning advisors we're trying to do the BAU at the same time as also advising the CDM group and the IMT. And so what we thought we could do is it's never ever been externally reviewed before, so we decided to have that external review to see is it fit for purpose and how can we improve it, how can we improve resilience and flood warning for the future, bearing in mind that we are in a very stormy phase, and while we hope not to have another year like last year, there are no guarantees. And so having our flood warning advisors upskilled, clarifying so they know what their roles and responsibilities are, and being able to be responsive during an event, really quite critical. The critical change is that at the time of Gabriel, flood warning advisors or officers were not embedded within the Emergency Coordination Centre, and that will be a key change, is that they will be there running on the shift like everybody else, so they have to be dedicated to that role. So that was a very, I think, key outcome, that study, funded by MBA. And also, the other thing, particularly when we're dealing with, obviously we only had one direct fatality in Gabriel from flooding, but we had around about 19 near misses where people could have lost their lives due to the flood event, but luckily didn't. But we don't actually have any national guidance set in stone which actually tells us, okay, at what water depth and what water velocity during a flood event should people not try to evacuate and shelter in place. And then if you have a worse event, and people do shelter in place and it gets such that they do have to consider evacuation, at which point does that flood water velocity in particular mean that risk of them then evacuating late is too high? And so a bit of things to work through there.
That's a good graph on page 36.
Yeah.
Which shows.
Yeah, so we wanted to see what had been done overseas, and so this is based on it. But critically, what those ones overseas didn't do, they didn't take the health indices of a particular population into account, and people will be aware that the health parameters for people in Gisborne Tairawhiti may be somewhat different to Norway or anywhere else like that, and so it's quite critical to see how applicable it was. It was actually good to find that it wasn't too bad, but what we were finding is that the one critical difference here from our conversations with people rather than actually the side of it is that flood survivability was actually governed by the ability of the smallest person or the frailest person within a cohort of people, like a family of whānau, to actually evacuate. So if you've got a big hefty guy and he's trying to carry 2 kids, his vulnerability will go down, his risk is far higher than if he didn't have to evacuate with 2 kids. And also things around about people who have fur babies and dogs and things like that, the risk that they pose, because that was obviously a critical issue here. And that will then lead on to other things about, we're obviously lifting dwellings. At what point is it actually safe to actually lift dwellings, and is it then going to be a question longer term of is it still safe even if dwellings be lifted? We have to actually then think about mandatory tree. And so this is a work in progress. We utilise that data to do what's called a risk-scape evaluation in Karakia, looking at okay, where was safe for them to evacuate to, and how did that relate through to what we knew of their evacuation behaviour. The critical thing about that, and it's partially highlighted in the blue map on page 37, is that pretty much all of Karakia was wet, except for one small area, and that area of Karakia that wasn't wet only has a freeboard of a very, very small amount, and we have to also note that the critical factor is that in Cyclone Gabriel and Harley and the other events, we had a significant amount of aggradation within the Waipoa River. So the next event that is of the same scale as Cyclone Gabriel may have a more adverse impact on Karakia. The conclusion is that the evacuation point that had been designated up on the hill was the appropriate one for people to actually evacuate to. The real critical issue, and from a TMO point of view to address, is how do we make sure that there is additional or further support at that site so that people feel comfortable going there and they will not be left there for 3 days and being able to have kai and shelter. And so those are the type of parameters, and that's a fundamental reason why this work is done, to look forward what we need to do in the future. Moving on, the newer flood frequency analysis, what happens in an event like this with the aggradation is that our current trigger points, for example, our trigger point for Karakia at 8.5 metres at Kanakalaa Bridge, that may not be the most suitable trigger point for an evacuation now because of the whole dynamic of that river has changed. And so the first step, and it is only the first step to actually work out that future risk, was the flood frequency analysis and to come up with it. And so we need to do more work there. But luckily, presently in council, we have one particular person in our environmental monitoring team who's way up there in Eckdom point of view, and I think he's going to get really on top of this and actually provide really good advice going forward. The last thing I had on here, I think from memory, was that one of the other things that we normally would routinely do after a significant storm is map all the landslides to give us a good idea of the volume of sediment that's been yielded, the impact on pasture and forests. That was, this time around, funded by MBIE again, and they're what they call their extreme weather event funding. The unfortunate thing is that GNS were engaged to do the work, only managed to achieve around about between 12 and 15% coverage of the region, and not necessarily the highest priority areas. We have mapped additional, but we can expect, once that work is finished, that there would have been well in excess of 100,000 landslides occurring in the Gisborne-Tairawhiti region during or after cyclones Harley and Gabriel. We cannot differentiate the two. Putting in context, the March 22 storm, which was also a very severe storm that impacted our region, we had around about 40,000 landslides from that one event alone, and that was a real event. So the key thing about that is that it will really mean that we need to actually reflect on land use, which we are doing, and overlay 3B, but whether or not we actually have the appropriate tools to actually come up with that is actually what needs to be tested, and we had hoped that this landslide mapping would inform that, but unfortunately, because it wasn't complete, we had to go to Plan B. And one of those Plan Bs is that during a visit to Canada in June, I had a very close almost look at a new tool that was developed by a large international consultancy called Stantec, which may be a very good predictor tool working out landslide propensity within our region. They feel that we're here quite well, and so we're working with Stantec and Auckland University to actually set up a pilot project for our region to do that evaluation, hopefully sometime in the next 6 months. And we have a new PhD student starting doing landslide risk assessment as well, and we're trying to draw him into that work. And that is, as ever, all you ever need to hear from me. But in fact, that forecast for the weather is to remain the current pattern for at least the end of September. We do monitor our weather 1 month in advance, so sort of by the end of September we'll have a fairly good idea of what is happening, because there's currently a 50% chance of a La Nina system re-establishing. But we can be fairly confident that it will not be unlikely to be another year like 2023. Some work that's currently been happening, particularly out of called NOAA in the US, points to the earlier eruption in Tonga as probably actually having an exacerbating effect on the cyclones in the year that followed. Mainly because of the injection of aerosols into the dust into the atmosphere, and so unless we have another one of those, I suspect we might have a chance of a similar year like we had last year. And that's probably enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Thank you for that report. Very interesting read as well. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
Thank you, Mary, for that. Yeah, really informative report. Thankful for the drone footage. Gee, what did we do before drones? It's amazing at these angles that you can now get at a point of safety to get that footage across. I had a question about Whakaari, White Island, because it's been doing its thing over the last few years. I don't see any reference to it in any of the reports. But I know some of the considerations at the top end of the coast has been around ash, and because previously, in the previous eruption, whenever that was, the ash did make it over as far as Rotorua. So what's our plan should Whakaari erupt?
From an ashfall point of view, Whakaari probably would be less of a concern than if we had an eruption from the Taupo Volcanic Centre. For most of the time, the wind direction we get from Whakaari means that most of it will actually be north of East Cape, and there'll be maybe a wee bit of a washover, but not significant. But if we had another Narahori type of eruption, and that could have a significant impact, ashfall from that, because ash from that is quite abrasive, so it can actually impact on things like pumps at our water treatment plant. And so that would be the far more significant risk to a larger number of people, potentially. But the key thing about those ashfall in populated areas where we have people relying on rainwater is that water will be on permanently for quite a significant amount of time. So really would be a critical thing to actually be able to have safe water supply and able to be delivered in those rural areas. Which 5,000 litres doesn't sound like a lot, but one of those two trucks could either be quite busy after an event like that. We do have a ashfall SOP within the TIMO system, but it hasn't been reviewed for quite some time. And that would be something I think would be a very valuable thing to do.
Councillor Parata, thank you.
Thank you very much for the report. I find that your reports are where I learn the most. The one thing that I really wanted to know is around the drone mapping and the information around, what page is it? Young Nick's Head. Where is it? It's page 33?
4, I think.
Yeah, sorry, Young Nick Station at Te Kuriapawa. I just wanted to know, is there a risk to life, human life, with these landslides?
There would be a potential risk to life if people were going, trying to walk around there. One of the things that we did pretty much immediately afterwards, we had a hui at Muruwai, and we have put up quite a large number of signs, and which actually do warn of that risk, and we have provided spares of those signs with Soraya Pahatu, and if they do get removed, then they're going to be reinstated. The critical thing that the hui identified as being not their own community, because they will do quite a bit of self-policing, I guess you could say. But we're coming into the summer season, and so we have access of visitors who want to get through the Muruwai gate, and I think it will be a local community decision about whether or not that gate is kept open. But one thing we did agree to quite some time ago, and that reinforced it here, is that we're not going to remove the woody debris that was around that Muruwai gate, to provide a disincentive for people to try and drive onto the Te Wherewhero and get through there. But there is signage everywhere we could think of. But if we've got enough signage there, and if we get people doing things, it is buyer beware. If you walk past a sign saying there's extreme risk of rockfall, that's a risk that you purchase. But the critical thing about it is that we have identified ongoing potential further risk, and so that is work that Young Nick Station and the Griffin family have been very, very forthcoming in giving us access. They don't like having people going on that station this time of the year because of lambing, but they've been very, very accommodating for giving us access there. So we plan to fly it initially just with a smaller drone very shortly, but then within about the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll actually have the big drone up in the air that can do LiDAR mapping, and then we can do, again, differencing between what we did last year with the regional LiDAR and the new, to actually come and identify areas which are moving, which are really subtle, you can't necessarily see by just looking at it. So that's going to be pretty ongoing analysis, assessment of that area.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm relieved to hear that we're working closely with the community of Muriwai. I know it's a close village and a close community, so I think that's an important thing. I just wanted to know if there's a comparison between what's happening on the station and what's happening in the Mangahoani.
I guess the thing, we've actually had quite a large number of these occurring in the last few years. You may recall that we've had a very large equivalent event of this further south at Whareongonga, about 2.5 years ago now, which is the more significant event to that. And then partway between Te Kuri and Whareongonga, we have had another one at Kapua station, again on Ngā Tamanahiri land, and then further north we have some additional coastal areas of very high instability. Mangahoani was a different beast, I guess you could say, and we are currently waiting on, actually overdue, the analysis from a process called Sky TEM. I won't bother going and explaining how it works, but it actually looks at the subsurface using electrical currents to see where water is moving, but it's not greening, and to see whether or not we can actually see active zones there. But that again could easily fail again, and that's one area we would be having to work with TREC and NCTA to manage.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Just a quick question. You mentioned at the start that there was a new slip at Waihope, and that road's just reopened, you know, a few months ago. Has it affected that again, or no?
The landslide that has reactivated is what we call a global complex, and it is the big landslide. Anybody's gone to that beach recently above tidal waters, you can see a very, very large active scar there that has reactivated, and we now have in our consents space somebody who arrived about 3 days after Gabriel, was actually quite a skilled geotechnical engineer in that team, and comes in from a roading slope stability background from Sri Lanka, and transitioning him to do a lot more work. So we're actually going to task him with doing a detailed analysis of that event. We are having ongoing movement on the road, but we're also having ongoing movement on the coastal cliffs as well. So it's something that we're going to have to monitor quite a bit, unfortunately, in that area.
Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the report, Dr. Murray. Very interesting and informative. And I'm glad you mentioned aggradation, which is our biggest issue, I believe, in the region in lots of different areas. It's hard to do something about aggradation once it's happened, but there are ways to stop it from happening, and that's to keep the water moving fast. At a point in Karakia, and I'll show that up and you'll get exactly where I mean, around about Burgesses, the river is half as wide as it is above it. And the reason for the narrowing, most of the reason, is trees. 2/3 of the riverbed is taken up by trees. That is easily fixed, am I right?
In actual, generally speaking, what we try to do with rivers to actually mitigate flood risk and aggradation is you actually try to stop erosion occurring, because that's the critical thing. Is the riverbanks themselves will be impacted if you have floodwaters going past, but the aggradation is actually generated by all these big landslides that has occurred upstream of it, and so it's actually that land use change is the most critical thing. We had already, prior to Gabriel, we had done an analysis of the upper Waipoa, so above Karakia, looking at the impact of Cyclone Bola in that area and the wedge of sediment that's been gradually moving downstream from that. And a lot of the aggradation, in actual fact, is that big wedge of sediment within the Waipoa above Karakia that is basically up and moved downstream in Gabriel due to that flood effect. But generally speaking, for what you try to do with flood waters to actually mitigate risk is slow it all down. So you normally like to increase roughness, what we call roughness, which is actually more vegetation on the rivers, on the riverbanks, because that actually sort of reduces the velocity of the water. It will mean that obviously greater risk of sediment dropping out, but the fine sediment will always migrate through. We haven't done a significant study of that sediment migration and aggradation in that river since, and it is planned to actually complete that study we did for the post-Bola sediment to have a look at really what's happening after Gabriel as well. But it's really a question of having technical resource to do that work and having it funded. And essentially, we had one expert who did the original work in the Waipoa, and we're trying to work out the funding to have her come back and finish that work, and that will give us a clear answer. But we have to, in many ways, the sediment coming down the Waipoa is a benefit because that actually gives us our beach as well here in the city beaches, because it's the sediment supply from there that keeps that beach from eroding, and it's the city beaches are in balance, and the reason why they're in balance is because of sediment supply from the Waipawa. So there is no short or long answer to that question. I think we really is something we need to do a lot more work, and that's our river engineering team has actually increased their capacity quite a bit in the since Gabriel, and they're doing quite a lot of work. They're doing work in some of the other catchments which have been a bit neglected from a flood risk point of view, like the Uawa catchment in particular is one where we have a big population close to sea in the receiving environment for those floodwaters, so that's quite a critical area to do work. And then we have the other ones like the Aotearoa and a few other ones where we need to do that as well. And because none of those have a formal stock bank system to protect habitation.
Any other questions in regards to, thank you, Dr. Murray. Always very interesting the stuff you bring to the table. Thank you from the team. And I think now we're going to pivot over to our friend Ian from NEMA. Thank you, Murray.
Thank you for your worship. I'll take the report as read. Just a couple of bits to add to it. Shakeout on the 24th of October, our national earthquake exercise. This year we're going to work with the Wainaui School here, and that will be publicised throughout New Zealand. At this stage, the Deputy Director is coming, John Price.
We always win that competition nationwide.
Yes, you do.
Just saying. Just
saying.
saying.
Ben was reminding me of that yesterday, I think. But we've also I think you've also put the invitation to the Minister to attend as well.
Right, we'll ask him.
I haven't had that back yet. As Ben's also raised, the space weather. That's just one of a few items now that the Minister's expecting, I guess, CDM to pick up and manage. So there's great expectations on emergency management and coordination right across the board from the Minister. And basically what that means is there's a lot more collaboration between the regional, local and national levels on some of these events that are occurring. Another one of the events is HPAI, highly pathogenic avian flu. There's another one we're looking at the moment. However, this is led by NBI, national planning's underway, Health and DOC are also assisting with that and support agencies, but there's no indication at the moment that CDM will be required. Coordination or lead from it, but you may be required to have a local input in respect of how it could affect you here. The other aspect that came out of Ruwhenua, exercise Ruwhenua, was the groups now want to exercise more regularly, and we have actually a national exercise program or calendar. It sort of died a death, sorry, inappropriate words, it elapsed due to COVID. We're now looking at resurrecting that, and basically it looks at, I guess, the national exercises that are planned at Tier 4 and how we relate and integrate with the regional ones and where you're running them, and also how you can feed off it as well and understand, I guess, the gaps that are there and how you can use national resources for your own exercises. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to find what page we're on.
So it is
62.
62. Yes, 62.
Actually, I'll also pass on NEMA's congratulations to the group for all those awards, and also to this group as well, because you're the governance body of the CDM group. So while Ben and the staff are actually doing all this work and getting the accolades, this group is actually driving it as well. So it's well done, and certainly congratulations from NEMA.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions from Ian? If not, I am going to move this lovely paper. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Dr. Murray. And thank you, Ian. Do I have a seconder?
I think Winnie had said that she had been the group thing was up there, so I'm sure that she would second the paper.
What's that?
Yeah, she's
Seconded by Councillor Parata. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you very much. Next, I am going to invite our recovery team. Rod, are you going to lead that for us? Thank you, Mr. Ben. So that's page 139. And then we'll go to the lovely Dallas.
Well, okay, to everybody, thank you, and like everyone else, on behalf of Recovery, being in the team, congratulations on your awards. It was great to see them flicking up the other night and all the celebrations that came with it, and all the kudos, so well deserved to you all. I'll take the report as read. We have got a presentation. I will talk a little bit through the report and then obviously go into more detail in the presentation. Over there you will see woody debris. You all have seen the Minister's announcement last week of the establishment of a Tairawhiti Forestry Action Group that's been put together by a number of, by 2 council reps and some external people, being the contractors, the Federation, Eastland Wood representation, some iwi representation and farming representation. And that group's been put together, and we'll look at the next sort of tranche of $27 million that's been tied to that funding. And that will work through what the current risk is and what future risk looks like in that woody debris scene.
That's a group that Patrick Willock is chair.
And Patrick Willock is independent chair of that, so thank you, Your Worship. So that's underway now. That's looking from a regional point of view. Woody debris itself, you will see there, we did have a wet sort of winter, and a dry spring has come upon us pretty quick. So we did have a slowing down of the woody debris program. We also, you would have heard Dr. Murray talking about that a little bit before, but we are looking at some of the environmental impacts of removing the woody debris, and we're working internally with our team on a process around how that is and how we go forward on some of this woody debris work that's been undertaken across the catchments. So that has had a bit of a slowdown. We've got some contractors obviously waiting to go again, so we may hear a little bit of frustration about that, but the team is ready now, just about to roll out a new programming on how we go forward as a collective view of council of this program of work. We are given aerial mapping, again, the region, and the basis of that is to get a good understanding of what has left. Since the woody debris program got underway back around September last year, October last year, we have had some more weather events. There's obviously been forestry companies removing woody debris in our catchments. We've removed a lot of it under council. Farmers have moved it. It's moved through the weather events. So to get a good handle of where we are on what's actually left out there is a good picture, because we will need to report back to the Minister as we want to seek extra funding to go forward, and we look at where the future risk is. We'll need to have a really good view of what's out there and understand that. And use the data to be able to help us tell the story on that sort of thing. So a lot happening in that area, but we certainly want to make sure that we are doing some restoration of our waterways as we are clearing them with the wooden debris. Roading network, again, you'll see there that we've got a lot of roading projects and initiatives underway. And again, we've had a wet winter, and the team have done a lot of work in scoping works. We're now about to move into the delivery side of delivering the work, which I'm sure everyone will be pleased to see. But it's been a complicated way of the funding. While we see we have lots of funding, it's really important that we won't even know till 4:30 today when we get a letter on the announcement of the National Land Transport Plan yesterday. So we'll see what our share is. And what that means is that we will then be able to go back to CIP, which is the Crown Infrastructure Partners, and work with them on what local share can be put towards each one of these work programs. If we didn't have the CIP funding and get Minister approval to use that for local contribution, we would have to use rates income for that. And if you look at 71 million, what we're proposing to get, that's around a $13 million rates take. So while there's been a lot of work done in the background, we've really got to understand the complexity of the funding models we're actually working in. So the team have done a lot of work and had a great meeting with NZTA on Friday around getting the tranches of work ready to go, and we should be ready to go with that. And we've actually already gone to tender for some of the slips and dropouts. So that work, once we get the funding confirmed, we'll be underway with that. I'll talk in a bit more detail in the presentation around some of that. Fossil, which is land mitigation, which is lifting of houses. you'll see that, and thank you councillors for approving the new Cat 2P land mitigation work, which now means that we've increased the value to $100,000, $95,000 for the applicant. That has now been approved by the Minister, so the Minister has approved that, so we're now adopting that. That means that all the houses that we had that had landslides, land remediation work that needed to happen that had no pathway to funding have now got a pathway to funding under this new policy. And Nadine and I just got a formal confirmation of that about while we've been sitting in this meeting. So that's now underway and approved. So that's really going to bring a lot of people that had a lot of worry around it. It's important to note that council won't be delivering any of the house lifting mitigation work. That's all done on a grant basis, and the lifting of the work will be done through Build Smart 2, which they will have a separate funding agreement with the government on that work. Cat 3 buyouts, that's still going well. We are up to over 60 houses purchased. We are on track to be completed by Christmas. That's a great, the team there have done excellent people management of both those, both the Cat 2P and the Cat 3 buyouts. We're getting great feedback from our community on that. The reason will be Christmas by the time we finish, and that's still 6 months ahead of schedule. That program wasn't meant to finish till June next year. And we have a lot of, we only have one person that hasn't actually started negotiations. Everyone else is in negotiations, but we have a lot of people that have been in their homes for a number of years and very elderly that want to go up to Christmas before they make a decision where they move to. So again, that program is well underway there. Flood resilience. We've got $20.4 million and 13.2 was approved for the Karakia part of that. There's been a lot of good engagement out there with the Karakia community on flood modelling, and they've had some partial modelling days, meetings where they've been able to show what the flood modellers presumed happened on the day, and they've had really good feedback from the community who confirmed what actually did happen. So we hope that by sort of Christmas, but after Christmas, that we've confirmed the flood modelling for there, and then we can go into design model of designing what the stock banks look like. The Waipawa stock banks, again, that's about to get underway. The dry spring means we might be starting earlier. If I was talking to Joss, I think he was hoping to get going in the next week or so, which is a month or so earlier, given that we've had a dry spring. But that's well underway and working well. And what we have been fortunate, I don't know if you would have seen in the press release, but we got another 4.7 million for capability. We're bringing people in to help us speed up some of this delivery, and a lot of that, some of that team is going into that flood resilience, and about 6 or 7 positions are going into roading to help speed up the delivery of that. And we're thankful for the government for that assistance. Community-led recovery plans. There's 21 of 30 completed, which is great. Work is happening on water resilience and water tanks with a lot of those communities. That work's well underway. And we've also outlined responses in collaboration with Marai and shipping containers on the dependencies with the Marai and shipping containers in our communities. And there is opportunity for collaboration with the public sector and funding there. So we are pulling some stuff out there and actually getting some funding through some of these central government agencies to help support where we are on that. That's just a brief update on the report, and happy to take any questions on the report before we move into the presentation. That's right.
All good, but you can also do the presentation, and then because the questions that these good folk might have might be covered in the presentation, and then we'll open the floor.
That's just the risk progress, and I think we've gone through the progress there on that. Woody debris, we spoke about woody debris with removal. We have actually, since this went to print, obviously had the increase of 27 million from MPI. We are sitting on around 2 lots of 27. We've still got 27 million from DIA funding and obviously 27 million from MPI that will come in as we sign off work with the Minister. As we said, there are risks. The conditions were a challenge, and the saturated land, that's actually slowed down, obviously, with we've got a bit of dried air. Those nor'westers certainly sucked a lot of moisture out of the ground pretty quickly, and things have dried out again. Iwi partnerships, we're working well with Iwi and mana whenua over the cultural and environmental sensitivities of the land. Community concerns, one of the community concerns are in the catchments around the ongoing maintenance in the Tairawhiti and the Waimata, but we are working with the catchment groups on what does that look like, and Kerry and his team are across those things. Project methodologies that we're working through, health and safety is paramount to this project, and obviously I do want to acknowledge that we did have a fatality on this program of work, and our thoughts are with the family and friends of the employee. Project scope and management, and continue with Ngāti Porou. So we actually have had some contracts with Ngāti Porou, and we've been working with them on this work. You'll see there just in the map around how much has been extracted in the bottom areas where it sits and where we've worked. We've probably chipped and burnt about 93% of what was extracted, and that high oxygen burning, which seems to be the most cost-effective way of actually removing the woody debris. Tineroto Road, work's being done in parallel on both options there. One option is the new road, which contains 2 new bridges, and the other parcel is the existing road. And what does that look like? The team are hoping to be able to bring a recommendation back to council pretty soon on what that is, once they confirm which is the preferred option, but we're expecting that to happen at any time soon. They've actually done, and that's just about complete, according to Dave Wilson and Tim, so we're across where we are there. But a lot of work going on into this project, a lot of work done on Bluff 3 to get those roads reopened, and waiting for the preferred option and what the business case says on what option that is. Bridges and dropouts. Obviously, bridges, the funding package today, announcement from the government will give us some direction on where we are with our bridges and how we can actually fund those, and using local share from CIP on that. And then there's numbers of the bridges that are worked on and where they are complete. Dropouts, as we said earlier, we've put the dropouts into tranches. NZTA have approved one tranche that we're going to start to work on and go, which is about 180 odd sites, which will go to which the market's we've already done some pre-market testing by going to tender, and we'll be able to, as soon as we get official funding go ahead from NZTA, we'll be able to start that piece of work. Roading and bridges, just some of the risks. We fail to engage with stakeholders, iwi and community appropriately, so we're well aware of that and working through that. Consenting processes can take a long time. Again, you know, some of that decision making around which option we go will have some consenting issues around that, and some making sure that we take those into consideration, and delay with poor communication with the funders undermines confidence. We have good relationship with our funders. We are keeping our funders up to date. They would like to see some work happen like us all, but they understand the complexities that we've been dealing with within our funding, managing our funding to make sure we get the best outcome for our ratepayers in that. Fossil, as I said, around the house lifting, that's now 2P mitigation, which includes our lateral land movement houses, our Cat 3 voluntary buyback, we're probably up to about 60 houses now, 60% of our houses. So it's about 30 houses out of our 54 did change. And we are programmed to be finished by Christmas on that. So that's a really good outcome. The government has got a lot of attention on this buyback, and they like to see it happen quicker, but as I said, we're still 6 months ahead of the target and working through that. The Commercial Silt and Sediment and Debris Fund, that was fully paid out, and all applicants have been paid out on that, and that's actually closed off. This is just a breakdown of the houses here, of lifting, elevation, how many that council will be looking at doing. This is changing, this number changes as people have a choice to go to Toitū Build Smart or get a grant. So people are still making their minds up on which avenue they will take. So these numbers are very fluent and they will move around as people make the decision on which way they're going to go. They're going to go for a solution where they get a contractor in that does it for them, or they are going to go for a grant where they get reimbursed through the process of doing that. And between us and Toitū, Build Smart, the government is just managing the funding because we both apply for separate funding on that. But we have got agreement on what the number of houses are to be lifted or have land mitigation on that. Cat 3 buyouts, there again, we talked about the houses. The top number 69 is the Whenua Māori homes. We did hear this morning that there's some work on the marae program. About 5 marae are underway now to be lifted and in consultation with. But you'll see there that we only got one house that actually hasn't started negotiation. 14 are under negotiations. 30 we have actually settled on, and 6 are under offer and agreement. So that's moving along well, that program of work. Fossil, the things that we are onto next with our homes that we've purchased is demolition. So we are going through EOI process now for contractors to actually look at the demolition of houses across the region. We are looking at which ones can be sold as homes and be removed, and which ones obviously have to be demolition. And that we hope to be able to bring a recommendation back to Joe, the sponsor, on her return on contractors we're looking at and what the process is, but we are looking at sharing that work over 2 or 3 contractors on the demolition of these sites. We have got security guards on some homes driving around and looking at these homes and keeping an eye on them, because we have got now 30 vacant houses across our city that we're working with. Flood resilience, I gave you a good update on that, but that's well underway with Joss, and as I said, we've got some extra resource coming in to help them speed up the program, especially looking at flood mitigation and sediment and expanding the program across the whole region. And so that work's underway now, and Josh is in the process of recruiting a couple of people to help him on that. The Waipawa Stopback funding is approved, and as I said, they will hope to get into that work around September, and Karakia is continuing with all the community engagement out there around the flood model. Some risks in there is obviously just contractor. There's a low competition at the tender box for that work. We're very fortunate that we have got the contractors performing the work are very good contractors. They've done a very good job for us. So we have continued with them on an extension on a tender process, but as we go forward, it's finding other competitive people to be able to tender for the work. Staff retention, loss of the team. As I said, we're getting more resource in to help them. And adverse weather conditions, delays to the program due to unseasonal weather. But under this stage, it looks like we're going to start early and get underway. Next steps, lots of next steps there around the planning, investigation and geotech, hydraulic modelling, design a significant culvert for the Complete detailed design of the upgrade of floodgates at Manatuki in the Tairawhiti, and the hydraulic modelling of the Tairawhiti and Waimata catchments, which is in town here, around what that sediment build-up looks like. Again, community recovery plans, gave an update of where we are with those, and lots of good work happening there around water resilience with our communities around water tanks, and working with central government agencies on what funding and how we can help move some of those things forward. A bit in a short time, but thank you.
Thank
Happy
you
to
for
take any
the
questions.
good report as well. Any questions from the floor? Any committee members with questions, queries? Not?
Great update.
Thank you, Councillor Pahura-Huriwai.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for that. And good to see the risks and issues. What I don't see that I've really spoken to them is how those risks will be mitigated. It would be good to see those as well. You're talking to them, but it would be good to see it written down. Just going back to fossil on page 140, the Cat 2P. Did I hear you say 95k per applicant? And if so, is that a relatively easy process for our people to go through who have already been waiting for a while?
Yes, sir. Through the chair. Yeah, 95,000 per applicant. Look, it is an easier process, so it's a grant. So as people send their quotes in, we can actually pay on the quotes. So it's broken up to about 4 tranches, so it's a lot easier process than them having to fork out the money first. And so yeah, we've made it a really good process to actually be user-friendly.
Excellent, thank you for that. And another question, sorry, Worship, just around you made a statement around page 39 on the Tairawhiti forest, not the actual, the 27 million. You also said that we're sitting on 27 million?
So we're not, sorry, apologies, sitting is probably the wrong term. We're currently using the 27 million.
That's good.
Yes, currently using it.
And just in regards, one last question on page 154, 15 whenua Māori and marae pathways. So I think you explained, is the marae pathways about the 5 that are to be uplifted? The 15 whenua Māori, where are they? Throughout the Tairawhiti?
Yeah, completely right. From right up north, right across the whole Tairawhiti, yeah.
So they're excluded from this?
They're excluded and being dealt with by DPMC, is it? TBK, sorry. TBK are dealing with them.
TBK are giving us the update this morning.
Yeah, they were giving us
It's another.
Are we able to get an update on that? Because that's one of the things that we ask as councillors is, because it's taking so long, it's already taken a long time for those that are not on whenua Māori, and we know that that's not really in our scope because it's supposed to be handled by the DC, DCMP, now TPK. It would be good to have updates on that, please.
Yeah.
Okay, or whoever's dealing with it now, because if we're not sure, then it's not
It is
ours.
through your worship, so it is with the CRU with Karakia Crib, who is leading that marae negotiations, and the intention is to have that all settled by December.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Parata.
Thank you very much for the recovery report. I'm really heartened to hear about the pathways now available to our people that kind of falling through that gap, and particularly around the work that's happened for FOSL. It's heartening to know that we're 6 months ahead of schedule, and even though we're ahead, whānau have still been through this for a really long time. So yeah, just want to acknowledge that it's been a long time since Cyclone Gabrielle, and it's so good to know that the council team are working really hard to find resolutions for whānau. What I'm really interested in is social procurement and social procurement outcomes. So I know we've had this conversation before, but I think in terms of recovery, it's really worthwhile knowing how the money that comes into the region for recovery is being used to support other outcomes, economic outcomes, employment outcomes. I know that sits outside of the scope of recovery, but it shouldn't be too difficult to find out from the contractors that we contract to deliver these services. I know that when we went out to do community recovery plans, and when we did the long-term plan consultation, that was something communities were really interested in, is social procurement. How do we try and make sure that the pie is getting sliced far and wide and everyone's getting a bite? And knowing that there are limitations in capable contractors, I just kind of wanted to know around whether or not that's something that the Recovery Office can or should be reporting on.
Through the chair, that's a really good question. Council has social outcomes. They've used them before in procurement, and they will be looking at those as part of the procurement process, especially in different packages of work, which actually relates to the social outcome process. They were used in the Provincial Growth Fund. I think they rolled out a number of social outcomes through that procurement process, and I know that Dave and Tim are looking at that again as they go to the market for this work.
One of the, sorry if I may through your worship, and they're trying to capture that through the contracts, but also one of the initiatives is to also include an area representative on our appointments panel as we go through that process as well. So there's a big procurement process out there, as been mentioned, in terms of slips and dropouts. So we're ensuring that we've got that expertise around the panel too.
Councillor Alder.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Good to see there's progress and things happening. Given that Te Karakia is without a doubt our most vulnerable community, we have the 13 mil to get banks built. We're still waiting for 11 mil. I presume that's for optioneering and some of the other things. And yet we're not going to be starting or finishing this job for 2 to 3 years. Is there any way that this thing can be fast-tracked?
Through the chair, and I'm not a river hydrologist by any means, but what I can tell you by listening to Joss, who is a very respected person, they are trying everything. It's to do with the getting through this, the flood modelling, getting that confirmed with the community. So he's working really close with a group and then the wider community. So he meets 2 groups a month out there and actually talks through this with them and the time frames. So the group and him are working pretty close together with the community to do everything as fast as we can. Once they get the confirmed modelling, then they've got to go to design and work through what that looks like. And we would love to do it quicker, but I can assure you that we've put every resource that we can into actually help this work. And can I just say, flood modelling people around the country at the moment are like hen's teeth. You know, they're really hard to find. So we're lucky that he actually went early to the market to confirm some people to help us with this work. So we're fortunate in that, and I hear what you're saying, and the community hear what he hears that as well. But he's now working with the community, and they can understand the process and the steps that we've got to go through to get the outcome. Your point's taken and heard.
Thank you for that, Rod.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move this paper. Seconded by Councillor Wharenga. All in favour? 1-3 carried. Lucky last, Dennis. Thank you for coming to talk to us about welfare.
Thank you, Worship. I assume everyone's read it, but I'm not going to assume. So, but we're pretty busy in our space. Towards the end of June, we had our own weather stuff happening, which did result in some needs assessments taking place. Thankfully, it wasn't, too big that we couldn't manage it, but the ability to be able to go down and support Wairoa as a local welfare manager was an absolute privilege. The ability to be able to apply our needs assessment system for them to be able to function and manage their own welfare response was also another privilege for us. So yeah, that was awesome to be able to go down there and meet some wonderful people. It was a very beautiful community. The Pacifica engagement is just growing legs. It's amazing. We have often have filled the centre, the ETC, with our Pacifica groups, our iwi and hapu groups. It's something that I probably wasn't expecting would happen quite as fast as it has. The amount of people that want to engage with the welfare group is just getting bigger and bigger, and it's very exciting to see. What we've got to be mindful of is making sure that everyone does understand their role and responsibility so things don't get noisy. But we're managing that really well. The sub-function cluster groups are also focused on making sure that we have plans, operational plans, SOPs, how we're going to work together, but lining everyone up to the groups that they most resonate with is actually working better than having a massive, huge welfare coordination group and no one actually knows why they're there. So that's working great as well. Exceptional support from agency leads. The financial assistance group is very well represented in the welfare coordination group. The forum was also very successful with 50 people attending across agencies. First one that we've had at the centre, and first one since I've been in role. Looking forward to the next one. Ian did a presentation on section 33 around reimbursement, which went down extremely well, giving people more information around how it works in the welfare space. And needs assessment training is continuing to grow. Over 300 people now understand what welfare actually means. That is also another privilege. So yeah, that's pretty much my report. But what I did want to say though is the success of our group is because of Ben's leadership. He leads us well. There's only 4 of us that sit in that office. It is filled all the time. So that's how exciting my update was.
Glass half broken.
Yeah.
Glass half full.
And there's awards going around, and there's letters from the minister and that going to Ben, but there's probably not a lot from myself, Marcus and Kevin, and I'll speak for the 3 of us. Our leadership, the leadership and management that we are exposed to daily is exceptional, and to be able to do this in 2 years is because Ben gave me permission to do it. So I really want to thank Ben for his leadership. It's awesome, and I am always, every day, very proud to be sitting in this position. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Dallas today? Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
Kia ora, Dallas, thank you for that reporting and congratulations on all of the great work that's happening around the region and into Wairoa, helping our friends down there, and also acknowledging the work in the Pacifica community, which is awesome to see. My question is on page 164.12, where you talk about the current challenges, including underfunding for mental health and addictions response manager and recovery manager in Te Whatu Ora.
So
what's our plan B?
Since writing this, that has actually been addressed. So I have Te Whatu Ora, and the current group that currently leads response is going to remain leading response. So that's yeah, I'm really happy about that, because that's the biggest part that concerns me.
Yeah, that's a relief. And also what was it called? The forum that you had. Yes. Did you have a lot of people on the coast attend that?
The invite went out to every person who is part of the welfare coordination group. There's 76 invites went out. I was mindful of being able to host 76 people if they all said yes. But what we'll do probably next year, and we'll discuss in WCG in December, is how are we going to do it next year, because I think there's an opportunity to probably expand further
what I'm seeing in your reports too, in Ben's report, like having that facility, the dedicated facility, emergency centre, now that you have, instead of trying to operate out of here, is making a massive difference to the trust of the community and attending, going to see, you know, where the heart of everything happens in an emergency and helping build those relationships. So, great. Yes. Thank you.
Councillor Parata, thank you.
Kia ora, I thought I might just, what do you call it, declare a conflict. That currently I am co-chair of the needs assessment sub-function. But also just wanted to acknowledge what Dallas was saying, that I think it's really important when great leadership is acknowledged by your team members. Ben, I know you've been acknowledged publicly and nationally for the mahi you do, but I think it's really important also to be acknowledged by your team. So I hope you heard that and felt it. And also just wanted to acknowledge Dallas for the mahi that she is doing, has been doing. Welfare seems to be the hardest of all of the CEDM functions, that it's the one that gets run down the most. It's where all the pressure is, and Dallas, you wear that so well. And that in my day job life, you got lots of compliments too, in terms of your support of Wairoa, Dallas, and I just wanted that to be noted here in this forum, so that I know that they've already communicated that to you, but I think it's important for councillors to know just how special and how talented, how capable you are, and how much that's being acknowledged across the East Coast region, which sort of includes Wairoa. So yeah, just big mihi. I support the paper. I'm happy to move it.
Happy to see you, Councillor, for that, and what a lovely bouquet, Dallas. And from all of us as well, thank you for the work. We know when we come to welfare work, that is close to people's heart. People are hurting. They don't know what is going to happen to their whare. They might not have anything to give them their day-to-day creature comforts, and you are there to help them on the journey. So thank you from us. Moved by Councillor Parata, seconded by Councillor Pahurihuriwai. All in favour? Contrary, carried. I declare this meeting closed.